Hey, what's up guys? My name is Sal, and this is another Expedition Log. On today's episode, the last episode of 2019, we'll be visiting a mall that, within the relative scope of retail history, is quite young, compared to the likes of, say, Dixie Square Mall, which was built in 1966, or the Providence Arcade from 1828. Today's location is a dead mall that never quite left adolescence. This mall is still open, but the signs of failure are pretty clear, and the emptiness is prominent. Allow me to extend my heartfelt appreciation to every single one of you for helping me reach 30,000 subscribers. You all rock, and I love every one of you. So make sure you're following me on the Discord server and on Twitter for updates. The links are in the description below. Let's close out the 2018 NC Chesapeake Dead Mall Tour with a place that I've been waiting to show you guys for a very long time. So come take a walk with me through the Virginia Center Commons in Glen Allen, Virginia. But first, a word from our sponsor. Our sponsor for this episode is an exotic car in an elite class of three-wheeled vehicles, which you could own for yourself using the link down in the description. It's a masterclass in automotive engineering and precision, and I hope to see more of them on the road soon. So for your consideration, I give you the 1975 Reliant Robin.
Reliant owners, Michaels of Selby have a choice of Reliants for sale and a full range of spares in stock. Yes, it's Michaels of Selby for Reliant.
Tonight, we're pleased to tell you that Reliant from Tamworth in Staffordshire have managed to do just that with their new Robin, as we hear now from Tony Bastable, who we find in glorious Goodwood.
Seems curious, really, that no one's thought of using the name Robin before. It seems a most suitable one for a small British car, and that's certainly what the latest offering from Reliant is.
The Robin is a three-wheeler, and it replaces the formidable Regal range of three-wheelers, which have had a very long production innings, 11 years. Absolutely flat out, the Robin could give you 73 miles an hour. Still, thankfully, a chassis under this little lot now stiffer than before, and other innovations include an improved gearbox. Undeniable fact that in certain situations, from emergency avoidances to sudden crosswinds, three wheels stand too good a chance of being less stable than four.
The idea of a mall in Henrico County, Glen Allen, Virginia, began back in the early 1980s when the Virginia Center Inc. holding company was incorporated in January of 1982. At the time, Edward J. DeBartolo was on a roll, building malls down in Virginia, with the construction of Chesapeake Square Mall in 1989. He formed a new partnership called North Park Associates, alongside the Faison Associates of Charlotte, North Carolina. And on September 28, 1990, construction began on their brand new mall. It would take just shy of a year to build, and would cost a total of $60,311,000. One of the two senior anchors, a Leggett, would open ahead of the mall on October 2, 1991. Then the dedication and grand opening of the Virginia Center Commons Mall would be held on October 20th, 1991, along with its second senior anchor, a Hex Department Store. In 1993, the Profits department store chain was in the process of buying out what was left of the Hex department stores throughout Virginia, with two other locations in Kentucky and one in Georgia. This transaction would pull Hex out of some pretty muddy water from their southern ventures, and it would also give Profits a larger footprint down south. The deal was finalized in April of 1993 and would cost around $7 million. And 5 months later, Profits opened at VCC in the former Hess building. Just after Profits moved in, a third senior anchor was added to the mall, and in mid-1993, a new Hex Department Store opened at the far end. You can't really see it, but there was a ton of birds flying around this food court. And by a ton, I mean there was over a dozen birds flying around, but I couldn't capture a single one on film. But just trust me, there was a ton of birds there. The DeBartolo Company and Simon both announced that they would be bringing their companies public in 1993. DeBartolo announced an IPO of 31.6 million shares of common stock, which had an anticipated initial price per share of $18.62, and this was to be underwritten by Morgan Stanley. Simon had a slightly more robust IPO, and DeBartolo stepped aside to let Simon go public because the market simply couldn't absorb this amount of equity that these two titans would bring with their separate IPOs simultaneously. So DeBartolo called off their IPO begrudgingly and settled for announcing that a new Jcpenney would be built at Virginia Center Commons. So construction was started later that year at VCC.
Everyone was asleep except Ronald, who had other plans. Out of his bed, he silently crept.
What are you doing, Ronald?
I'm giving McDonald's gift certificates to all my friends. So hamburger can get a hamburger. And Grimace. Is it Christmas yet? Not yet. Grimace can get a shake. Christmas. Captain Crook, Lance's yard. And the mayor. So to the chimney Ronald did reach. You can get him at McDonald's, 50 cents each. When suddenly, bright light shined in his eyes, Ronald turned around, amazed and surprised. Hi, guys. I make too much noise? All his friends had a present for him. McDonald's gift certificates for me? Oh, gee. And a Merry Christmas to all of you from all of us at McDonald's. Merry Christmas.
In 1994, it was finally DeBartolo's turn to go public, when Eddie Jr. brought the IPO forth under the same terms offered in 1993. Morgan Stanley would underwrite 30.4 million shares, and 7.6 million shares were released through DeBartolo themselves. The Jcpenney had just had its grand opening, right after the IPO was announced. This anchor cost the tenant just over $3 million. Then, just weeks later, construction was started on a fifth senior anchor at the mall, which was built directly next to the Jcpenney. The building was completed and the grand opening was held in February of 1995 for a brand new Sears and its auto center. The Simon Property Group would acquire the DeBartolo Realty Corp for nearly $1.5 billion in 1996. And as the two families merged, this new entity would be known as the Simon DeBartolo Group, with a market capitalization of an astonishing $7.5 billion, with an overwhelmingly massive portfolio of 111 regional shopping centers, 66 strip malls, and 6 specialty retail centers spanning 32 states, all of which together generated a combined revenue of $16 billion in retail sales in 1995. In 1996, 69 years after the Belk and Leggett families split up their ventures, Leggett was formally bought out by Belk, and the Leggett at VCC was converted to a Belk. Also in this year, the Profits department store chain was in the process of being bought out by the Dillard's department store chain. And by 1997, the Profits anchor at Virginia Center Commons, which held the center anchor location at the mall, was rebranded into a Dillard's. Then, in 1998, Dillard's bought out 4 Belk locations in the Richmond area, including the end cap VCC anchor, which was adjacent to the Hex. The conversion was quick, and shortly after the purchase was completed, the former Belk was turned into a second Dillard's anchor, ending its very short lifespan as a Belk. At the turn of the millennium during the early 2000s, while banks were still spitting out massive loans to willing business owners, causing excessive long-term debt across the country, and what would set the stage for hundreds of malls to ultimately fail going into the 2010s, Simon would be no stranger. Among the loans Simon would amass during this time, one in particular would take prominence in the Virginia region in 2004. Simon put up a couple of its lower performing malls as collateral, including Chesapeake Square Mall and Virginia Center Commons, and they borrowed $73 million to bring more operating capital to their southern U.S. mall portfolio. Now that's what they said to the banks, but none of this money actually went back into the malls that they used as collateral. Concordantly, VCC, Virginia Center Commons, would receive no love in terms of major renovations or makeovers at any point during its short life so far. There was upkeep and there was maintenance, but from what I could find, there was no major redesign. There were no renovations that were done. Now, if I'm wrong about this, hit me up in the Discord server, my Twitter, or in the comments below, because there weren't very many news articles on this place, and I had to rely a lot on SEC filings and a lot of financial statements for the facts. So if I'm incorrect on this, please hit me up, and all those links for my social media are in the description below. So here we are going into an FYE, for your entertainment. I don't know if this company's actually around anymore. This was a staple in most kids' lives. You know, stores like this, stores like Sam Goody, places that sold movies and CDs, and you'll see in the back they sell posters that you would hang up in your dorms or even in your bedroom when you were a kid, and just a lot of tchotchkes and toys and accessories and stuff. It was a fun store to walk around. And you could listen to the latest albums and sample new CDs. It was a cool place where a lot of kids would hang out. But unfortunately, this was closing the day that I was there. But this will give you a taste of what these stores were like. Are there any albums that any of you remember purchasing at a place like this? At a Sam Goody, an FYE, something like that? Is there an album you guys remember that stands out? That's an awesome album. Carl Bohm conducting. The Flying Dutchman, Wagner's opera. Really, really cool stuff. Look it up on Spotify. Awesome overture. What's the longest any of you ever spent flipping through these poster sheets back in the day? Did you actually ever buy one of these things? Or did you just look at them and waste time? The Indiana Jones Complete Adventures would have been more complete without Crystal Skull. Changed my mind. It breaks the entire formula of every Indiana Jones movie. It didn't need aliens. And yet here we are with Indiana Jones 5 looming. The dude needs to just hang his whip up. In 2006, Macy's was at the tail end of its takeover of the Hex Department Store company, and on May 28, 2006, Macy's took over the VCC Hex, and it was formally rebranded with the new masthead. Dillard's would then mark the opening of the 2010s by rebranding the central-located former Hess anchor space to a Dillard's clearance center. This wouldn't last long, as they would close the store down later in 2010. As they're wont to do, Burlington Coat Factory got moved into their space just a couple months after Dillard's clearance left. But remember, Dillard's had another space open at this mall, which was typical of their early to late 2000s occupancy structure. They would occupy multiple malls with a 2-anchor space footprint, and this ultimately led to their departure since their attention was divided and quality suffered. In October 2011, Dillard's shuttered their second location at VCC, at the far end of the mall in the former Leggett-turned-Belk space. And just after closing, an American Family Fitness gym would open in its place. During May of 2014, Simon spun off a new holding company, called Washington Prime to handle their less than stellar operating properties, of which VCC was included. Then in September, Washington Prime paid $2.06 billion to purchase Glimcher Realty Trust, and this new entity was called WP Glimcher. Virginia Center Commons was pushed over to this WP Glimcher portfolio, officially losing Simon as their masthead owner. In 2015, the mall was assessed for $30.7 million. In January of 2016, Macy's announced that their Virginia Center Commons store would be closing after about 8 to 12 weeks of clearance sales, and the store was shuttered by March of 2016. The mall was assessed for $28.5 million that year, losing nearly $2 million off the 2015 price. Also in 2016, during the Macy's liquidation sales, in September, Washington Prime disclosed in SEC filings that Virginia Center Commons was among their non-core properties that it intended to sell. And WP Glimcher entered into a purchase agreement with the Cohan Retail Investment Group of Great Neck, New York. Cohan then completed their purchase of the mall for $9 million on January 10, 2017. This price was a steal, and it was against an assessment that held steady from 2016 at $28.5 million.
Last year, Sears tuned up 1 million engines, performed more than 1 million brake repairs, installed over 3 million shocks, sold upwards of 9 million tires, and replaced more batteries than anyone else in America. At Sears, we install confidence. Best of all, we do it right next door. All this.
In 2018, the mall was assessed for $15.8 million. And one of its last remaining major sales draws, which was Sears, the company Sears, they were having pretty big issues. In October 2018, Sears filed for bankruptcy, and it would go nearly a year through court cases and ownership disputes. And ultimately, half snake, half scumbag, Eddie Lampert, would purchase what was left of the company for a $5.2 billion deal, in which it turns out he wouldn't pay nearly any of that, and would have most of his own personal debt canceled as part of the deal. He screwed thousands on this deal, the worst deal in the history of deals. Despite his purchasing of the company, the VCC Sears announced closure, among several dozens more across the country, and the Virginia Center Commons Sears held its final day of sales on January 20th, 2019, and it now sits vacant. We're now in the concourse of Sears, and when I was there back in 2018, obviously it was still open. And at this point, it was before October 2018, so it wasn't closing yet. This store was still open. And we're about to go inside here, and we'll take a very brief look inside, but it's kind of odd. It looked like they were doing renovations inside this store. Either they were renovating part of it to move new product in, or they were just closing off parts of this store so that you couldn't access it, so that they were diminishing the footprint so that they could prepare for possible liquidation. So much product. There's so much product on this floor, just like Jcpenney. They just put way too much product out. They need to stop doing that. They need to put way less product out, give you a little bit less options, so that you're sure the choice you're making to purchase is right. And this is what I was talking about. This back area just had tons of fixtures in it, but you'll see that they were painting it, they were working on drywall, and who knows really what their plan was, because they did announce closure shortly after I shot this video. I really don't know what their plan was here. they were most likely prepping this space so that they could use it to store fixtures and things that they might not want in the view of the shoppers. But they didn't do a very good job in shielding this area from prying eyes such as myself. Most of you know what a Sears looks like, and I'm not going to walk through the rest of the Sears because it's just another Sears. It looks like they were painting this pretty recently. So maybe they were prepping this for something customer facing, I really don't know. But they were actively working on it for something. What that thing was, I don't know. But we're going to walk outside of the Sears and we're going to come back in at the now vacant Macy's entrance, which is my favorite courtyard at this mall. Virginia Center Commons is currently powered by two anchors, a Burlington coat factory whose sign is visibly lachrymose with black tears of retail death, and Jcpenney, who packs way too much product onto their floor and whose shoppers generally find better success in less cluttered spaces such as the internet, where they can move freely among thousands of products without tripping over the misguided placements of sweaters from 3 seasons ago. Tenancy at VCC is incredibly sparse, and since I last visited, more stores have closed, and whole concourses are now blocked off. This concourse is the former Macy's, and as you can see, there is no commerce happening in this entire concourse. And there's really not a day that goes by that I don't think about this concourse. I don't know what it is. There's just something about this place. Perhaps it's how the light bounces off of the planters. I don't know what it is, but this concourse, this courtyard, I must think about it at least once a day. It's an incredibly serene place, and I wasn't hassled in the slightest by security here, so I really got to think my thoughts and get to know this place. It's a very cool place. This mall is on a downward retail spiral, but it soon might be redeveloped into a massive sports complex. Plans were approved by Henrico County to move forward with the Red Key Company, who is set to design, build, and subsequently operate a full indoor sports facility and convention center to bring a potential $33 million per year in untapped revenue, along with tons of new jobs. This could be huge for the area, and if it comes through, it would bring a major boost to this local economy. I always have a sense of optimism when a mall is in this kind of shape, when there's clearly this many tenants missing, and when it's had such trouble keeping anchor spaces filled. But in this case, I would really love to see this entire place, or even part of it, redeveloped into that sports complex, because the city voted for this, and the city's backed by constituents that want this sort of thing for their community. And if there's a structure that isn't serving its community in the right way, and they have a chance to reuse this space for something more profitable and enjoyable for the community, they should probably do that. Now, the mall is facing some legal issues, which will definitely prevent any redevelopment efforts in the foreseeable future. There's currently 3 lawsuits filed against Kohan and the mall. One lawsuit was filed by prior tenant Alpozio's Restaurant, who claims that poor maintenance caused a water main break in the winter of 2017. Now, around this time, they closed the restaurant for renovations, but apparently Kohan rented out the restaurant space for a fashion show without the owners of the restaurant knowing. So this was a pretty shady move. When they finally came back for the restaurant, Kohan had changed the locks, and they evicted Alpozio's Restaurant. The other litigation is being pursued by Henrico County, who claim that the mall is violating the county's fire code, building code, and zoning ordinances, and that Kohan has, quote, failed to inspect, test, and maintain the fire protection system in the mall, close quote. Henrico County has also filed a petition recently in April saying that, quote, the parking lot has deteriorated significantly and no longer meets the requirements of the plan of development. So until Kohan gets their act together, the mall's gonna just sit in limbo. Despite these plans for renovation, the mall won't go anywhere. I'd like to close this video out with a few shots that my good friend Anthony from Faded Commerce took just recently, which shows that there are closed concourses that are sealed off and more has closed and degraded. As you can see here, there is a barrier set up preventing you from seeing about 1/3 of the entire mall. This barrier is set up to prevent you from seeing the closed Sears and closed Macy's portions of this mall. And that just happens to be my favorite part of this mall, which we just saw previously. And sadly, this is the fate of many malls today, where mall management chooses to hide any problems with the mall rather than fixing them. Thanks for the footage, Anthony. Everyone, make sure you go give Anthony over at Faded Commerce a sub. His channel's awesome. I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to watch this video, and if you made it all the way to the end, you rock even more. 2019 was an awesome year for the Expedition Log series. And once again, I'd like to thank all of you for helping me to reach 30,000 subscribers, which is a huge number. I'd also like to send a special shout out to all of my patrons, who really do help in every penny that they commit to helping fund all of these expeditions, because every penny counts, and it really does help in getting me out there on expeditions. Because yeah, I do have to work a day job, and I'm happy to do this, but every little bit helps. So thank you all so much. And I'd also like to thank the DebMalls Discord family. If you want to join that Discord server, the link is down in the description below, and we are chatting 24/7, and you can come hang out with us. We do voice chats, we do a whole bunch of stuff. It gets pretty silly. And also make sure that you are following me on Twitter and Instagram, because I post updates regularly. I'll see you guys with episode 50 in the beginning of 2020. Take care and have a fantastic day.